Guys, it has been so incredible to watch your response to the podcast and the recent episodes that we've had, but most importantly, your response to the announcement of long-term mentorship. And I love to teach, and I was trying to think of what could be the best way, because in mentor sessions, we're leaving people with more questions than answers because we'd spend 2 hours on something, and we would just realize that there was more to do. Workshops were not enough time to practice or to have situational questions. And so I'm super excited for long-term mentorship to launch. If you're interested or want to know more information, there's a sign-up link in the show notes. That's where you need to be if you want to hear it first. And we'll send you more information on it. We're launching at the time that this episode comes out pretty soon. So you'll want to be on the list. Make sure you do that. Pop into the show notes real quick. And I would love to get to know you. And I would love to invest in your business for 2019 and make sure that it's awesome. Today, we are going to have Spencer Boerup, who is the founder, creator of Magmod. He is an amazing photographer. That's how I found out about him years ago. And he's created tons of products over the years. But the main one, the magnum opus, if you will, is his Magmod creation. And so we are talking to Spencer just kind of what it's like to transition from being a photographer and running a full-time business and enjoying it. Like, he was a great photographer, to putting out a product that's, he says it's his Hail Mary. It's the one that he is trying to retire on and think of his family and stuff like that. And he killed it. And he did it through Kickstarter and crowdfunding, and honestly just experimenting and putting in a lot of his own work. And there's just some principles that he talks about, like creating disproportionate value, which I love, and making it easy for people to sign up and buy. And then he talks about the principles too of systematizing a huge business with 25 staff, and they're a growing company too. And just how different that is from what a lot of us do as solopreneurs, or maybe we have a small team. And so I wanted to have Spencer on just to kind of walk through that journey. We also get a little bit nerdy because Spencer and I both love technology and we love gear. And so we talk about kind of the things that have changed over the past few years, because Spencer, his best photography work was kind of between 2008 and 2013, and then Magmod launched. And so he's got a lot of perspective and a lot of good things to say. So without any further ado, here's Spencer Boerup, the founder of Magmod. Here we go. Spencer, how's it going, man?
Good, Adam. How are you doing?
Good. It's a pleasure to have you on. I am hoping for an updated workflow DVD to come out sometime soon, but I'm sure you're pretty busy, so that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Sorry about that, but I'm just still amazed that you remember that stuff.
Yeah, it was super good. That was probably, it was very influential in my photography career, if you will.
Well, that's humbling to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you on today. And for those who don't know, we've kind of introduced you as the guy who invented Magmod, but give me a little bit of your backstory, the history, how you got started, because you are and were a photographer. So give me kind of the background, where are you from, and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, so photography was kind of a hobby in the later high school years. And it was just something I enjoyed. My father had done it in college and stuff, but never really had the opportunity to do it because back then it was all in film. So I was kind of at the birth of digital photography to some degree. My father had a digital camera in the late 90s, which was kind of the smallest point and shoot. But anyway, I jumped into it 2001 and 2002. It was just a hobby, and did 1 year of college, and then I decided to kind of go serve a full-time mission for my church for 2 years. And so I had to bring something. It was in Brazil, and I took thousands of pictures and started to see how to make a good picture. And when I came back to Arizona, was going back to school for kind of an art degree. I wanted to do graphic design. My father had a printing company, and that's kind of what I did growing up was working for him, and just thought, hey, graphic design would be cool. Even though I really kind of wanted to do photography, I wanted to run my own business and have my own opportunities, and decided to take that hobby and kind of start trying to earn some money from it. I started in about 2005 trying to earn income as a photographer and wanted to pursue it becoming a career. And by middle of 2008, I had essentially quit my job and went full time into photography. And then, of course, the recession hit, which wasn't necessarily easy, but for some reason, I was still able to keep up my bookings and continued to grow through 2013. And along the way, I did several kind of offshoot products as a photographer for photographers. The first one was Adobe Lightroom presets that had companion Photoshop actions called Presetopia. That is kind of no longer operating, but I was kind of the first one to really come out with a series of Lightroom presets for photographers to simplify their workflow. And I was the only one that really had companion Photoshop actions that really kind of solidified the workflow. So kind of just did that casually. I never pursued it as a full-time thing. Photography was still what I wanted to kind of make my career out of. And it was 2008 when I did Presetopia, and then gained some friends in the industry, namely Tony Hoffer, and that's where workflow came from. We I guess both had a similar mindset towards approaching our post-processing, and decided to do a kind of a joint venture and some training. Did a workshop here and there with photography, but ultimately knew that a retirement option from the art of photography would be very difficult. As much as I loved photography, I also equally loved the business side of it. And I started to see kind of a plateau coming, that there's only so much I could do as a solopreneur photographer, kind of doing everything myself. And I didn't see much of a market potential where I'm at in Tucson versus, a lot of East Coast cities with millions and millions of people, and it's very connected over there. Whereas in, Southern Arizona, it's fairly distant from a lot of major cities. And I saw the potential and didn't feel super confident with it, and had started to think, well, what else could I do? I had already enjoyed doing a couple offshoot things, and saw that my future would be in the industry in some way, but not really sure what it might be. And so that's where the early ideas of Magmod kind of came from, was me looking for just a cool idea, just something I was really passionate about and something I felt I was still an expert in. And so, necessity is the mother of innovation or invention. And, I shot a wedding in, I want to say March or April of 2013, and was frustrated with the tools that I had to use. I was trying to gel my flashes in a dark room that had a bunch of tungsten lights. And I think I lost one of my flimsy little Velcroed film gels, and had inconsistent color temperatures on my flashes, and just felt frustrated that night. And apparently I woke up the next morning and just felt, man, I wish I could just stick them on and I didn't have to worry about it. It wasn't a hassle. And that kind of simmered in my head for a few minutes, and the idea of magnets was a thing that popped in my head. It's like, oh, if they just stuck there like a magnet, that'd be really cool. And I just had a flash of inspiration and started drawing up a few ideas of whether or not this was possible. And that's where the whole idea of a modular system came into play. And I had used magnets in my photo studio here in Tucson when I'd have different types of customers come by, whether a wedding photography customer or a portrait photography customer come by. I would swap out all my photos on the wall quickly, just with magnets and the alignment. It was just something I was experienced in. And so that idea of applying a modifier with a magnetic concept is where that flash of inspiration came. And I don't know if you could say the rest is history, but that's kind of the advent of where that came from.
I love that. I didn't know the story about how you swapped out prints when you had meetings using magnets, and that was kind of helpful in your process. That's amazing. And that's a good tip for anybody who has like a physical space and wants to swap out images on the wall.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the best idea, but I thought it was neat or cool. I wanted my prints to look as if they were floating away from the wall, whereas a canvas is obviously kind of touching the wall or a frame, and so I wanted that modern look, something different, and that's where I had the idea of doing magnets to, you know, make it easy to swap, but also give them that floating look as well.
Totally. Now, this is before we kind of talk about the Kickstarter part of Magmod. Just for a lot of people who listen to this are kind of newer photographers, and even me, I've kind of only been professional for about 6 years. What was the industry as far as wedding goes, like in 2007, 2008, and then compared to now?
Wow, that's a good question. What was the industry like 10, 11 years ago? I recall several prominent photographers. Chris Becker went by Becker. He was very well known. Jessica Clare, they were both friends, and so a lot of popular photographers were coming out of the California area, and so the industry was I don't know how much different I would say it is, other than the people that everyone seems to look up to comes and goes every 2 or 3 years, and new rising stars come into play that people admire. They have a slightly different approach or a different style or a different business concept to make photography into a business. So I don't know if it's too different, other than the technology was very different in terms of our tools. We didn't have studio strobes that you could take on location, plain and simple.
Right.
There was a few battery packs available for Alien Bees, but those weren't necessarily the best lights to take on location anyway. They were affordably priced, and they had their pros and cons. And I was always probably on the early adopter side of products. I like to be part of that first trial of a product, and I believe the first battery pack I purchased was a product called by Innovatronics. I think they were based in Southeast Asia somewhere. I don't know if it was Australia or somewhere else, but it was this huge block. Think of like a car battery, essentially, wrapped in a nice shiny metal case that had a few buttons and switches, and you'd plug your studio strobe into that, and that's how you went on location. Or you had speedlights, and you had to wrap up pocket wizards and have sync cables. And so speedlights were becoming more popular because of their portableness, but the communication between camera and draw off camera flash was very rudimentary. The cables would often be very finicky, and you try and go cheap with like the cactus triggers, and they would literally fall apart the second time you use them, or they wouldn't trigger themselves. And so I was really getting out of photography, getting into Magmod as all these cool new radio triggers came mainstream. And I'm really jealous because I see how easy it is to use these now. And I still use them from time to time, and it's like, wow, this is light years ahead of how simple it was when I was shooting, because I didn't have radio triggers and I didn't have Magmod. And I don't just say that to plug the product, other than whenever I do use it, it's fun to use because, man, it simplifies how simple it is to set up a scene, which was very convoluted and complicated back then. And so I would say radio triggers, larger studio strobes that have adequate batteries, and simple, easy to use modifiers like Magmod is the biggest difference I see from 10, 11 years ago.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was thinking about that. I remember hearing a podcast back in the day. I think it was Teach a Man to Fish or something like that. And
yeah,
just talking about the industry, both technologically and then like going through a recession, as a business owner that, isn't necessarily a big corporate company. Like, what was that like? And so, I was kind of curious about that. Now, do you know, kind of trying to think of the best way to think about it, but like now Magmod is this ginormous thing. You've done, how many Kickstarters have you done? 3?
We just completed our fourth
one. And like, how in the world was that process when you first did the very first Magmod? Like, were you literally building stuff in your house? Did you have a friend who was into products? What was that process like starting from scratch?
It was painstakingly meticulous. It that doesn't necessarily fully comprise how I feel about it, but it was a lot of trial and error and a lot of picking yourself up off the ground and trying to start again. There was a few times where I almost stopped, didn't pursue it for various different reasons. And I kind of put it on pause for a few weeks or a few months. And so the idea came in March of 2013. We launched on Kickstarter at the very end of October. So that's really only about 7 months, but there was a periods of off and on of whether or not I was going to pursue it. And basically I did everything as much as I could. I had the idea, I did some sketches. I knew how to use a program called SketchUp, which used to be a Google program. It's kind of a simple CAD mockup application. So I kind of drew them up in that, and then I took those prints or those files and I got 3D prints from them. And that was kind of my first proof of concept. Like, does this concept work? And so I took the 3D prints and I put some magnets in them, and I tested different strengths of magnets to see, all right, is this really going to work? Is this strong enough where I would want to use it and feel comfortable using it as a wedding photographer? And it got to a point where, all right, the proof of concept seems legit. The modular nature is awesome. The idea of rigid gels is a step in the right direction. And so then I went to try and manufacture it and found tons of roadblocks there. Manufacturing in the United States would have been incredibly cost prohibitive and just difficult to do. And went on Kickstarter and found a different product creator that had worked with silicone before, and just reached out and asked for referrals. Like, hey, would you recommend your supplier? Because I didn't want to take my idea to some shady place that was potentially going to rip off my idea.
Sure.
So I got a referral from a couple people and reached out and ultimately picked one of them and sent them one design of the 3 main products. And it came back almost perfect. And I said, wow, like this was a step in the right direction. This seems totally viable. I understood how to manage the supply chain. I'm not sure necessarily why, but obviously I had experience shipping DVDs across the world with workflow. I had grown up in my father's printing company, so I understood packaging design and graphic design and assembly. Like I grew up kind of doing that kind of stuff. So I think I had some advantages in my previous experiences that helped me get past some of the barriers quicker than maybe others might have experienced. But also I'm just a very stubborn person by nature. When it feels like I'm told no, or I can't do something, it kind of feels me like, no, I'm gonna do it despite that, because I'm gonna prove it that no, it is possible. So a lot of those roadblocks, I feel, it was just persistence. You had to knock one out one at a time. And then it came to a point where the product was essentially to a state where if it was going to go any further, it was really just going to be, let's see if the market actually wants this. And so everything I had invested at that point brought me to basically the product is functioning, it's there, it works pretty well. Let's see if the market's even interested before I try and order stuff and then try and market it and actually sell it. And so that's where the process of Kickstarter came into play. And that was, took about a month and a half to make a video, to write a compelling story. I think I had to redo the story 3 times and was continually trying to shoot different clips, by myself of, how to present the product and, make it appealing to photographers. And I felt that the video was kind of garbage, and decided, all right, well, we're going to put it out there and let the ship sail and see what happens. And thankfully, I had talked to several friends that had understood the progress and who are excited about the possibility of the product. And essentially, when we launched Kickstarter, I just spammed everyone I knew and said, hey, here it is. Got a new product. Tell me what you think. If you like it, support it. And that's when it just kind of blew up. It just took off instantly. We raised our funding goal in 5 hours and exceeded our goal by 600% in the first 30 days. And that was a pretty strong indicator that there is market potential for this, and that's what I'm going to pursue now. I'm going to kind of phase out my photography and just pursue this new business.
What was your family's response? I'm sure like your family sees you making this product and you're putting money into it, and you're probably still shooting at least a little bit at the same time, right?
Yeah, I was still shooting a little bit, mostly just to keep the bills paid, even though I could see the writing on the wall that ultimately photography wasn't going to be my long-term thing, and was basically prepping this as a Hail Mary pass. Like this got to work. This is my future. I
Mm.
feel like this is something that has some traction. And I don't think my wife ever questioned it. I don't know if she ever felt uncomfortable with what I was pursuing. She had seen all my entrepreneurial success before, with the different offshoot products that I did for photographers and my own photography business. So she never really questioned it. She saw that this was something that I was passionate about, and at the time was just busy being a mom. My first daughter was born in March, and part of being a dad um, was what actually spawned some of the ideas for Magmod. And so it didn't seem out of the ordinary that I was working on a new project. That was something that I'd done many times before, I guess. Um, so yeah, but yeah, I was still shooting just to have a little bit of income and keep that going to make sure I could see this through to being launched on Kickstarter.
Totally, totally. Now, I feel like nowadays Kickstarters these are like full-fledged companies before they even launch the product. There's so much that needs to be done, and you guys do a really good job. I think of Narbox, those guys, they do a really good job, and it's like a campaign. Obviously, it's a Kickstarter campaign, but you're emailing every day, you're updating, you're kind of trying to keep the people who've already backed the product interested. What's something that you've learned, or tips and things that you have really been key for, you think the Kickstarter side of things? Like, how have you made that successful? Like, have you seen a test versus, in one video being better than the other, or one way of writing copy? Like, how does that all work as far as from the first Magmod Kickstarter to the most recent one?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I had going for me in the very beginning, for the very first Kickstarter, was a product that was just mostly done and ready to order. I've participated in dozens of campaigns, some of which I've never received. But my very first Kickstarter was back in 2011, I think, that I participated in. And it was a watch band for the iPod Nano at the time, which was a small, square, watch-sized type of iPod. And I liked the idea of a digital high-class watch. And so I backed that campaign. And it was the first campaign that ever went really viral from my perspective. And it almost broke. It was just shy of $1 million. And back at that time, that was a huge deal. And that was kind of the first time that I think crowdfunding was solidified in the mainstream mentality, that this is a way for creators, artists, designers to pitch an idea and see if it has mainstream appeal. And so I saw the need to present Magmod in its infancy as a nearly complete product. And at the time it was, and it wasn't me like, hey, I've got an idea, I need some funds to help prototype and do stuff like that. So I think that's really key. If anyone's ever thinking of doing crowdfunding, get it to that 85-90% completion as best you can, and that definitely makes it a lot easier for people to jump in and trust you as a stranger that you're gonna follow through with your claims. And so I would say that's very much applicable to all of our campaigns. That we've always launched products that were very close to being shipped, and we've always maintained our shipping timelines, which is actually an anomaly in the crowdfunding world. A lot of companies will pitch a product, they'll get really successful, and then they'll experience delays and even sometimes don't even produce the product because of the challenges that come afterwards with supply chain and manufacturing and just delivery and fulfillment. And for the most part, I've felt very strongly that stuff just needs to get figured out well beforehand. And I think that's a key thing to get figured out if you're going to create something to ensure success is basically show that it's ready to go, and all you're doing is collecting a pre-order at that point, essentially.
Right, exactly. I mean, you're trying to provide this at the time disproportionate value. You're saying like, "Hey, we're going to come 90. We just need you to come 10." Very similar to the Hitch movie when he's training Doug how to kiss. But that's you're trying to eliminate all those barriers and just saying, "Guys, like we've done this. One, do you want to be a part of it? Two, do you want your own version of this? And three, do you want your version to be cheaper than the market, or maybe it's just more valuable than when we launch to the full market?" That's brilliant. That's awesome, especially because in the startup world, you're asking for money for something that you haven't seen. But for you guys, especially now, with the success of the first one, the fourth one, for me, I just backed that, and I was like, well, of course, like these are good products, and this seems like a lot easier than anything else I would want to use. And so it was right. You knew what we wanted, and I think that was a huge key. Are there any other areas kind of in photography that you think are lacking in a certain piece of technology? Has there been anything that you've seen and you're like, you know what, I wish somebody could work on that, or do you think it's kind of stale for now?
Well, that's a fairly broad question. I appreciate seeing the advancements in lens and camera technology. We've seen some advancements in the different form factors of lights, and their portability has been increased. I don't think, and this is trying to be as non-biased as possible, I don't think I've seen light modifier enhancements the way we're trying to kind of tackle some of those problems. But I think an area that could be developed further is actually on the print and presentation side of photographs. I think a lot of things have kind of basically stayed the same. Every once in a while, we'll see a new medium like metal prints or acrylic prints, or a different type of canvas. And I think there could be better ways to increase the ability for photographers to enjoy their art in a printed fashion. I'm not a big fan of basic coded prints that you'd get from like a photo lab. To me, I think they're kind of generic. I'm much more of a fan of the handcrafted, like Boerup papers and all these kind of fiber rag papers, and just something that's truly unique that just resonates with me. I guess I was like the artistic side of the prints rather than the commodity side, that it's just a print with a picture. The print is part of the art form itself. And I think there could be some cool innovations in how photographers can present their artwork. But it's also kind of a waning side of the industry. Everything's moving digital, and people consume photography in a digital fashion, and much less so printed. So I'm not sure if anyone's up to disrupt or come up with some new ways, because most of the disruptors right now are the labs, and most of their stuff is really kind of the mainstream mass market products rather than something unique or different for the sake of being different and interesting.
Totally. No, that makes sense. I think of Fracture down in Florida, who does like glass prints, and people love them, and the technology crowd, the Apple crowd loves them, and they're always big sponsors of podcasts and stuff like that. But the reality is, like, the piece of art is still the piece of art, just on glass, and like you said, like metal prints and stuff like that. But yeah, that's an interesting take. That's not what I thought you would say. I thought, and obviously, I guess when I think of prints, I don't think of technology, whereas Magmod seems like very nerdy. And so when I think of advances and stuff like that, the printing was totally not even on my radar. So that's awesome. That's why you do what you do, obviously, Spencer. So
I think there could be some cool advancements with the wireless communication between the camera and a flash. I think they've gotten better. I don't think TTL is great. I'd love to see maybe some concepts of distance based from flash to the subject, and allowing you better consistency I think Profoto's probably done a good job with their TTL, but whenever I've used it, it never is very consistent. I'm not a huge fan of it. So I think simplifying the right intensity of light could be an advancement in the future for some flash brands. Um, that's always something that I thought of is, if I had light stands and lights set up in a dark reception, you have to dial them in. If you want consistency, you have to do it manually. And that's, a process. And to simplify the speed of that process could be something I think is really cool.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, something like, and I'm just pitching random ideas. What if every flash, had like the Face ID sensor from the iPhone 10 on there, and it's reading, distance, it's reading the light, it's reading the shapes, and using like the 3D tracking, like, stuff like that. And then, you could use Bluetooth to like establish distance away from the subject and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think you're onto something there. That sounds like a really cool thing.
Could be a really stupid idea as well.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, we always joke that the world could just be taken over by iPhones. So now, the size of your company when you were just a photographer to now, I think is the big takeaway for this is how many people do you have on staff at Magmod?
Let's see. There's currently 21. We just had someone start this week. We have someone starting next week.
Wow.
Which will be 22. And we have someone starting the 1st of October, which will be 23. We'd probably be hiring quicker if we had the bandwidth. Recruiting is a science and an art, and it is a very detailed process. We're always looking for people to join our team, but it takes time to run that process. And right now we don't have enough people dedicated to doing that. And we also we have run out of office space. We've got about 18 people full time in 2,400 square feet. So it's getting a little tight, and moving and getting into a new space will help us be able to hire a little bit quicker because we have a place to put them in and help them be productive while they actually start.
That's awesome. What has, going from running your business to now with 21, 22, growing a growing company, like, have there been any resources or books, or did you get any training, or even did you just, have a phone call with somebody you respect and they gave you a little piece of advice and said, hey, here's something to help run a company when you have, more than 2 or 3 team members, like what has been kind of, or if there wasn't anything like that, what's something that you would tell somebody as they're transferring from a small boutique company to 22, 25 plus employees?
Yeah, for me, what's funny about that question is the first thing that came to mind. There's a book called The E-Myth, and Tony Hoffer actually mentioned that book while we filmed Workflow. And I think for any entrepreneur that wants to learn how to scale a business, that's a really good book. It's by, I believe, Michael Gerber is the author. It's called The E-Myth. I think the most recent one is The E-Myth Revisited, and it's the E is the entrepreneurial myth. And I would read that. That's a good foundational book that helps you understand how to not be the person that runs the business and how not to be the business yourself. Mm. And I think having read that a long time ago, I think at Tony's recommendation, that was when the lights kind of turned on for me, or at least made the connection, because I saw the same thing in my father's company, where he was kind of an integral part of the operation. And as a photographer and solopreneur, like I was the entire operation. I had nothing to eventually sell as a business. Like if I wanted to retire, I could sell the business because of its success. It was me. And so learning how to get yourself out of the success of the business is the concept that the E-Myth talks about. And so it talks about processes and systems, and really how to establish a business that can run without you being present or being an integral part of it. So I'd say that's a really good book. A book that's really transformed my life and the business here at Magmod is a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. And that book is all about principles that are tried and true but organizes a lot of these organizational principles in a very simple and easy to follow fashion. And he talks about it like an operating system that every business has a way it operates. And if you follow these principles and use some of their tools to help you define the operating system for your business, it becomes a lot easier and more enjoyable to work in and to manage and to operate, and helps you get what you really want out of your business, which for most entrepreneurs is the freedom to do what you want in life. And so I highly recommend that book, along with the E-Myth. And the traction is they present this operating system as EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system. And within the EOS, I guess, family of books that they recommend, there's tons of books that they suggest that you, as you read them, you realize a lot of the principles that are presented in Traction are kind of taken from all these other amazing business and entrepreneurial books. And my favorite happens to be Good to Great by Jim Collins. And Jim Collins is an incredible author, and wrote a series of books, the first one being Built to Last. How does a company establish principles that make them last and enduring for decades and long periods of time? And the second one is Good to Great. How does an entrepreneur company go from good to great, the greatness, the very best of the best companies? And what is the principles that allow them to become great? And I read that a few times now, and every time I read it, I learn new things. And but Traction kind of simplifies how to maybe implement some of these principles in an easy to follow fashion. So those are probably the three best books that I would recommend for any entrepreneur. It's really kind of eye-opening and revealing of how do you really get a company that's scalable. E-Myth talks about the processes and systems. Traction talks about how to simplify the principles you would read in Good to Great to take your company from really good to making it lasting and enduring and to achieve great, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. I love that. Thanks so much for coming on, man. It's so cool to finally chat with you and kind of hear the story of Magmod. And now it's this huge thing. And we talked a little bit before the show about how, photographers, most of us are solopreneurs. The first, our biggest goal is to just make it work, to pay our bills, to have some profit on the side, to be able to buy a house on our own income or to support our family. But for some people, that happens pretty quickly. And then you're like, okay, what do I do with this now? Or your personality, myself, and a few others I know, we're always kind of thinking for the future. It's not even that we dislike what we're doing. And so it's really cool just to watch this company, this dream of yours, this thing that started with you playing with magnets and trying to solve an issue in the photography industry. And now, there's nothing like the product, which is awesome in general. And then two, you guys do keep innovating and getting better. And you're helping photographers become better too, because if the tools are out of the way, then it's easier for us to express what we want to do. And so I love that. So thanks so much for coming on, and thanks for doing all of that. It was absolutely awesome.
Oh, it's my pleasure to talk with you, Adam. It's been a great conversation. Thanks for inviting me.
I know I say this all the time about our guests, but obviously I choose the guests, or our community chooses the guests. And I love Spencer. Like I said, I've been following him since pretty much before I was a photographer, and just how he does things, even his old photography work was inspiring to me. And then when he came out with this product, it was something different. We just knew that this was going to change the photography world. And if you haven't used Magmod or any even modifier on your flash before, this sounds like an ad, but it's not at all. Spencer is not paying us at all to do any of that. This is just a product that I've used for the past few years, and it's incredible, and it's made, like I said, to get out of the way, and it's so much fun. So if you've never checked it out, go to the website. Link is in the show notes, and just check it out. Kind of take a look and maybe see a photographer in your community has one if you want to borrow it or check it out. It'd be so, so cool. If you would like more information on the long-term mentorship that we're launching year 2019, for all year, for next year, for 12 months, I'm going to dive into 10 photographers, and my goal is to make them successful. And we already have a few people that are ready to go, ready to sign up, and we haven't even started official signups yet. But if you're interested in that or want to know more information, you can sign up for that at the link in the show notes, or go to Instagram, The Bearded Tog, and there's more information in there. We would love to have you. And if you want to know more information, we'd be happy to send it along. So other than that, thank you so much for listening to The Bearded Tog. Have a wonderful day, guys, and keep being awesome.